Good morning, students. We are happy to welcome you to this prestigious course, B.Sc Psychology, for your undergraduation program. We are inviting you to the Tamil Nadu Open City family for having joined in this program. Let us go one by one to get clarity about the concepts, concepts, and components of this unit. The first one, we will have the introduction about the psychology and the various methods which were adopted in psychology. Psychology is the science of mental life, both of its phenomena and such things we call feelings, desires, cognitions, reasoning, decisions, and etc. This was actually proposed by a famous scientist, William James, in 1890. Then, the psychology is defined as a scientific study of the behavior of living creatures in their contact with the outer world. This is the definition given by Kurt Kofka. But the contemporary definition is psychology is a science of human and animal behavior, and it includes the application of this science to solve human behavior. Psychology is a science, first, it is having roots from the other discipline called philosophy. So we call it is a science branched out from philosophy. The philosophy, from philosophy, it came out as a science subject because philosophy is deemed to be a subject in the arts discipline. When it comes out of it, in 1879, once the experimental study was started in this field. In philosophy, the principles are explained with real-time examples. But to qualify as a science discipline, one subject should have certain basic elements which are observable, which are testable, and third, which are verifiable. And to be called as a science subject, we should satisfy some parameters. They are observation, prediction, and control. Psychology, as a science, it deals with the experimental study about human behavior. That is, the human behavior can be observed both in the closed setting or in the open setting or semi-controlled setting. So the first parameter, observation, is reached out. And now the second parameter, prediction. To a certain extent, we can predict the behavior of a person based upon our past experience as well as his past actions of the concerned person. So, to a certain extent, we can predict. And at this point, we would like to indicate that psychology is not astrology, where the astrologers will give you a prediction, this will happen, may not happen. But in psychology, the prediction is in only up to a certain level where the individual's behavior will be predicted, whether these things may be achieved by this person or these are all required for this particular person to reach out these goals. In that way, our behavior is predictable. And next comes the aspect called control. Of course, unlike the basic sciences like physics, chemistry, and botany or zoology, that absolute control is not possible because this is a social science where absolute control is not possible. Control can be done only in a certain way. That is, in this basic sciences, say for example physics, but that chemistry, there is a concept called absolute zero. But that concept we cannot reach in the social sciences. Say for example, we cannot measure a person's behavior or his attribute, say for example motivation, intelligence, personality, in terms of number. The numerical value is are all assumed values only, and we cannot have a fixed numerical value. So we could not say that the person is motivated at a stage called nil, that is zero level motivation or zero level intelligence or zero level personality. So because of this is being termed as a social science. We cannot have absolute zero. So absolute control is not possible. Of course, now the scientists have given some effort to make some controlled study. Say for example, in the normal temperature, what is the behavior of a person? For example, its decision making or precision skills. When the climate is changing, when the room temperature or the external temperature is changing, what is your precision level? Say for example, our soldiers are guarding the nation in the glacier regions also, where extreme cold, minus 40 degrees is a very common phenomenon. What is the reaction time? What is the precision level? These are all can be measured because the temperature is naturally controlled at 40 degrees. So we can say. Then we can come to the 0 degree. Then we can come to the normal temperature or cold temperature, or we can go otherwise. What will be the precision when the temperature is 50 degrees? That is one extreme to another extreme, some minus to plus degrees of temperature. What is the behavior of the individual? We can measure. In that way, psychology emerged as a science. It came out of philosophical and it went an extra mile from philosophy, and we follow, as we quoted earlier, observable, that is observable, verifiable, and testable. There are certain phenomena we can test and we can find out. We call this as the experimentals. Okay. Now coming back to our roots of psychology. Towards the end of the 19th century, William James stressed the purpose of and functions of behavior and mental experiences such as direct observation and emphasize individual differences. 2 points he has given. First, philosophy gives certain points. We derive certain things. Say, for example, philosophy speaks more about mind and soul. But these are all a principle called metacognition. If you feel it exists, it will exist. If you feel it is not existing, it is not existing. There are so many other things are there. To prove these theories are there, or to prove this, there is a functionology is called, that is called logics. So way of presentation of things in certain way, in coherent way, so that it will give answers for all our questions when the matter is presented or in a concept is presented in a coherent way. But in psychology, people or trusting only at the level called observable behavior. In our behavior, we got two different things. One is overt behavior, another one is covert behavior. What is overt behavior? Overt behavior is one we can observe, and then the covert behavior is we can only infer that behavior has happened. In psychology, we trust more on the overt behavior or direct observation. So William James said that functions of purpose and functions of behavior and the mental experience like direct observation and individual differences. He stressed that every individual will differ from one another. Very rarely some individuals are alike, but not same. To an extent, the twin study says people's behavior are similar. Again, we cannot stress it is same behavior, it is a similar behavior only. Then by the beginning of the 20th century, our famous scientist from Vienna, Sigmund Freud, emerged, and he challenged both the structuralists and functionalists with his new school of thought called psychoanalysis. Basically, Sigmund Freud is a physician, and he was a pioneer in developing the case history method. He has collected the history of nearly thousands of his patients, and when he was free, he used to do a back analysis of what are the basic things of a particular individual, and then what is the current status, why it has happened. Based upon the past experience of the patients, he assumed the current happenings are running through. So he came to a conclusion called whatever we feel, whatever happening to us, whether it's good or bad, or acceptable or not acceptable, it is because of our past experience or childhood experience. That we will see later in detail when we are talking about psychoanalysis. Then in the 1950s, next school called humanistic school has emerged. So far, the basic structuralism defines that our behavior is structured because this scientists came out from the physics discipline as well as from other disciplines, science disciplines, and then functionalism. Then psychoanalysis came with the concept of suppression and the childhood experience as the cause for human behavior at the adult stage. But still, then there is some lacuna in accepting the principles. So, yet another school of thought came for humanistic school. It believes that people are positive and goal oriented, and it is one of the positive school. It has emerged. Now, coming to structuralism, the first one was Wilhelm Wundt, who has developed the first laboratory, and structuralism, which focused on inner workings of consciousness. Then this structuralism was later expanded by another scientist called Tishner. He refers that images, sensation, and feelings contribute to form experience. There are certain images or memories, the sensation, what we feel, what we had, and then feelings. So that is, it says the structure of a mind is composed of these concepts. And the famous one is this structuralism used a technique called introspection. What do you mean by introspection? Introspection refers to looking within. That is, it is a self-analysis. So, through this structuralist, those who follow in the structuralist school study the conscious experience, and objective features such as taste, sight, and certain non-observable, that is subjective feelings as responses, will, and mental image. The next one is functionalism. That is, this is proposed by William James, and the functionalists believe that the mind and body are intrinsically one, though they appear as distinct elements. So they started feeling that mind is present inside the body, and both are distinct elements, but it acts in unison. The mental activities are the result of adjustment between the mind and body, and that because of that equilibrium, the things will be done in a better manner, and it gives an importance to the learning by doing. Okay, and developed activity oriented methods like project methods for teaching and learning, because most of this was applied in the educational psychology. When we are coming to a subject core course called educational psychology, this will be handled in detail. Next comes the behaviorism. The behaviorism as was proposed by John B. Watson. He was he was deemed to be a modern psychologist who gave the that is a acceptable definition to this psychology. Then it he studied the observable behavior, and it was compared and analyzed for its relationship between stimuli and response. The famous Pavlov study was in the line, it's an experiment which supports this school. With this behavioral approach, people are studying the behavior rather than at internal workings, because it is readily observable by people. Okay, so as we have seen in the earlier section of this lecture, if psychology were to be a science, its data must be observable and measurable. The best example was Pavlov's conditioning, a Russian physician who conducted the first study, and he won the Lomer Prize for this one. Then comes the Gestalt psychology. This school of thought was begun in German land, and in Germany it was forwarded by Max Wertheimer. They emphasize the importance of role of configuration or organization in the perceptual field, and highlight the role of insight and understanding in learning. The fundamental tenets of these schools are that whole which determine the behavior of its part. That is, whole is different from total. Next, an individual perceives the thing as whole, not as a mere collection of or constituents of elements. In the book, we have given picture examples so that we tend to perceive certain things as a complete objects, even though they are not connected. There is some gap in between. Next, a learning situation is more than the elements of which part is composed. The Gestalt school emphasizes the importance of motivation and purpose in any learning. Okay, that is, to learn something, or to when you get an idea about certain things, depends upon your level of motivation and why do you see that. In later social psychology, you can see the actor observer effect. That will be explained better when it comes to this one. Then came from our Sigmund Freud. He developed the theory of psychoanalytics, and then it became very prominent because of it saying that much of what we do and think result from our inner urges or drives which seek expression in behavior and thought. Then the positive approach, humanistic or phenomenal approach, was developed by American psychologists, namely Carl Rogers, Rollo May, and Abraham Maslow. They defined that we are basically free to determine our lives. That was the major tenets of this one. And then came cognitive perspective. The cognitive psychology, which examines the internal mental process such as problem solving, memory, and language. That is, that cognition here refers to all higher order process except motivation. That is, it refers to thinking and memory process, and then the term development here refers to the long-term changes in this process because it comes as an evolution. Okay, not as a revolution at a single point. It comes as a revolution point. Then biological perspective. Lot of inputs from the other disciplines were also accommodated in this discipline. So it is called as biopsychology, also called as biopsychology or psychobiology. Is application of the principles of biology to study the mental process and the behavior. The prominent fields are the behavioral neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience, and neuropsychology. These are all the prominent subfields of biological perspective. Then we will come to the methods of psychology. Methods of psychology refers how do we assess people or certain phenomenon or certain attributes of people. How do we think? So the first one is introspection. This is developed by William Horne, in which one has an access to his mental state of mind, why it is happening. Then this is very much useful for understanding oneself as well as to help people when they are in crisis. Okay. Next one, experimental research method. Slowly it came out of the philosophical principles where many things are not testable or verifiable. Now the experimental thing has come, and then that was a sayings of Charles Darwin was adopted here. That is cause and effect of any behavior. When there is an effect, there should be a cause. So on this line, it is assumed that any change in one behavior is due to some other component. So this one which we see as a changed behavior is called dependent variable, and one which used to make this one in a modifiable form or one who are the causes are called independent variables. That is, the independent variables are the factors or concepts which are manipulated by the experimenter as per his need. Manipulated here refers to continuous altering according to the research purpose. So this led to the concept of hypothesis testing. Next comes observation. This was observed as one of the major method of inquiry, where it requires a systematic registration of events without any attempt to interfere with the variables operating in the event which is being studied. The best example for this nowadays we are seeing in the media, it is called candid camera. There we can see some people are doing something, and later then when they gone to a point, they will realize that they are being recorded for some purpose. So this is a best example for the observation method. Then comes survey method. The first method which came for statistical calculation, which helps for statistical calculation, in which an error can be easily reduced or controlled through application of statistical techniques. Here, all our behavior are assigned with numerical value or coding method. So it is an important research in which we are taking certain sample of people from the larger group and assuming that this sample is the exact replica or prototype of larger population. Next comes the case study method. In the case study method, Whereas in observation, it is having a bird's eye view. Whereas in case study method, a person, a individual by individual, basic things are studied and observed, and everything was made as an in-depth study and intensive investigation of a single individual or a small group. Next comes clinical method. Okay. This clinical method refers to study people when they are reporting to a counselor or psychologist for some problems. Why it has happened. The next one, correlational research. That is, here in correlation research, the set of variables are examined to determine number of or set of variables are examined to determine whether they are associated or correlated. That is, whether they are related, how far they are related. That is, if one variable is increasing, the another variable will also be increasing. This is direct correlation. If one attribute is increasing, another attribute is decreasing. This is negative correlation or indirect relationship. So this is being some mathematical formulas are used to measure the correlation value. We call this as a correlation coefficient. Then the scope of psychology. The scope of psychology, it has got wider coverage, come out of the philosophy, and it has developed some major branches of research, say experimental, biological, cognitive, lifespan, that is developmental, personality and sociology, and certain sub areas of applied psychology. It is called clinical, industrial, organizational, school and educational, human factors, health, neuropsychology, cross-cultural, and so on. And research in psychology involves observation, experimentation, testing with the statistics, and analysis were discussed in terms of the data which are collected and analysis to explore the process or stimuli which are underlying our human or animal behavior. The scope of psychology. Scope refers to the level certain things will go. The first one is general psychology. As we are talking now, it covers all the basic aspects of the human life, what is happening. Then physiological psychology. What are the connectivity between the body and the behavior, or mind and the body? The physiological psychology, in which the entire human organ and all the systems are studied in detail, and which gives the explanation for human behavior. Next, development psychology, where a human individual's behavior is studied from day one, that is from the embryo form to the old age till his death. Next comes social psychology. How an individual reacts in the society. How a group affects individual behavior, or how individual affects group behavior. This is a major focus of social psychology. Then comes our abnormal psychology, where the deviant behavior of every individual is being assessed, and there is a demarcation who are normal, who are abnormal, was clearly explained only from this branch of psychology. Next, animal psychology. Like physiology, like medical experiments, majority of our experiments also started with animals because of so many ethical considerations are being developed. Okay. Then comes parapsychology. The parapsychology that refers to observable behavior, not through which is not verifiable, sometimes beyond our cognition or basic sensational process. That is why we call this as a extrasensory perception. These type of things are handled in this subject. Next comes experimental psychology. We have discussed how certain behavior is being assessed both in controlled or in open or free settings. Cognitive psychology, we have seen except motivation, our thinking, language, memory, all the intelligence, everything is being as being studied here. Then personality psychology. Due to its prominence, that majority of our behavior, day-to-day behavior, was assessed in terms of the personality. So a new separate discipline was devoted to personality psychology. Then comes the branches of applied psychology. So far we have seen the basic psychology, then this is application. First one is clinical psychology. And majority of our people will have some problems, some adjustment problems. Then personality, it leads to personality problem, and it will go to a stage where the person will be out of their own control. They will be addressed, their problems will be addressed, identified, and then remedial measures will be given by assessing their problem. This is refers as clinical psychology. Next comes, we spend majority of our life at the work spot. So we have to see what is happening in our organizational life. And all the people are not always either happy or unhappy. And we are, and next one, human assets are the only assets which are having appreciable value. You buy any machine, any object, after a period of time that value will decrease. That is, in terms of money, monetary value will increase. Only the human capital, the value will increase. That's why we are getting increments and we are getting more salary the more experience we have. Proportionate to our experience, we will get salary. But a person's motivation, training, performance, retraining, how to change the organization, all these things are being dealt in this industrial and organizational psychology. Next comes a counseling psychology. This refers to the basic thing called talking therapy. How an individual can be counseled, how he was made to handle his own problems on his own without any external direction. That means we are strengthening the individual to handle his own problems now also, in future also. Next comes biological psychology. The modern pathways are identified due to this modern technology, for example, MRI, CAT. So many things have come. And then what is their contribution? Brain-based behavior, and then genetical medicine, all these things and their result and their behavior is being added as a biological psychology. Then next comes the environment psychology. We live in a country, we live in a nation. Our environment is very much important. We have to save the mother earth because the earthly factors, that is, it starts from rain to weather or climate, affects the human behavior, and human behavior will change according to the environment also. There are so many studies, that is urban studies, rural studies, at hill region, as we had spoken, how our soldiers are behaving at the glacier point. All these things are coming under environmental effect. Not only that, even the effect, the ionic effects on individual behavior also widely studied. Next comes forensic psychology. This helps in solving the problems faced by the investigator while investigating the offences. So this gives a code of line how a, a criminal would have committed the offence. Next comes health psychology. This is a positive approach which follows prevention model. That is, which says that we have to take care of our health, how we will promote our health behavior by avoiding certain factors. The concept of mental health and mental hygiene were well addressed in this discipline. Then comes the positive psychology. How we have to go positive. And then basic things are there. For example, that certain maxims are there. For example, the best example is work is worship. That is a basic aspect of our positive, that is also basic aspects of our positive psychology, like that what we think we will become. So we have to view things to be in a positive way, to be positive. Okay. So our attitude makes us what we are now. That was the principal focus of positive psychology. Then for dedicated to the psychology of women, sports and exercise psychology. How to motivate sports person, how to encourage them, how to relieve them from the stress and depression when things are happening. Because we know very well mild level of anxiety, moderate level of anxiety, moderate level of stress, moderate level of fear should be there for the sports person to perform well. If he is having too much of anxiety, too much of fear, again too less of anxiety, too less of fear, the performance won't be at peak. We want optimum level of anxiety. Then the new emerging field, psychology nursing. It is a dedicated subject particularly for taking care of people, that is the role of caretakers. Nurses are the second mothers to every individual. Next to mother, nurses will take care of us at crisis point. Then comes, this is being nowadays used as a prominent method of warfare. So the basics and the approaches are handled in military psychology.